Hello and Happy New Year 2026, January 2026. I want to, before I make any more videos on this channel, before I make any more videos on the internet, I want to use this video to set the foundation for, if you're watching this, not just to help you in life for the rest of this year, but also for the rest of your life. And you may have seen the title. Why is veganism, vegan, the word vegan, veganism, why is it so political? Or in the first place, yes, veganism, being vegan, saying you're being vegan, is probably the most political statement you'll ever make in your life. And this is because how it relates to how the world works. So this video is going to be, yes, it's serious, because there's nothing really very funny about how the world works, I'm afraid, at the moment, or has done for a long time. So I want to try and, I think, make a video that's quite unique. I've never really seen someone who has been able to put together all of the different factors, all the different things that are going on in the world, and put it together in a way that's just easily understandable. So there's people like Noam Chomsky, for example, if you've heard of him. He's very good at looking and analysing and seeing how the world works. But I think there's a difference between being able to just look and see what you're seeing first thing, and then taking that in, analysing it, and then actually working out what's going on. So yes, Noam Chomsky is good, for example, but even here I think there's some things that are lacking. So just to set the groundwork, I suppose, first of all, there's no exact figures, but about 1% of the Western population, so in the US and the UK, some surveys and some analytics say it's 1 to 3%, but pretty much about 1% at the moment of the Western world is vegan, or would call themselves vegan. And usually you come to veganism for three main things. So firstly, well, not in any particular order really, but so for me, I'm vegan for the animals, so that's one thing. Second thing, you're vegan for health, so being vegan, plant-based, is the most healthy way to live. And yes, not vegan burgers, specifically eating rice and fruit, for example, so starches and fruit. I've got more on that. I made loads of videos on that, and that's what this channel is primarily about, is what food you should eat to be healthy. So there's two things, and then the third thing is environmental degradation, destruction of the planet. So they're the three things why people come to veganism. And the reason why it's political is because the thing that is the cause that is the most important, there's nothing more important than the salvation of your own species. There's no other worthwhile cause than trying to save the planet, and the planet is worth saving. So for the 99% of people who aren't vegan, there's some people in that 99% that maybe are on the fence. Then maybe they call themselves vegetarian, they maybe do veganuary for a month, and a lot of people, they just don't really engage with their daily reality. They do maybe the 9 to 5, or they just do what most people do, and they see veganism, most people just see veganism either as just because of the way that the world brings them up. They think it's ridiculous, they don't want to have anything to do with it, they laugh at it, and all sorts of reactions, I've seen it, continue to see it. And then you have a large amount of maybe younger people, because they engage with social media, where they go vegan, and then they say they're not vegan, and then they're vegan again. And to be vegan is for those three things: for health, for animals, and the environment. And once you engage with that, there's no going back. So if you are vegan, you are vegan for life. So people who say that they're vegan, and then maybe 6 months later you meet them, or maybe social media stars, they were never vegan. They were just, maybe as you would call it, greenwashing their own marketing in order to get views, to get likes, to get engagement, in order to make money. But if you're a vegan, you're vegan for the planet, to stop planetary destruction. You're vegan for animals, to stop animal suffering. Or you're vegan for your own health. Then that's what you'll be doing for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what other people say to you. It doesn't matter what your family say to you. It doesn't matter what your friends say to you. It doesn't matter what your work colleagues say to you. It doesn't matter what you see on the internet about trying social media people that maybe you liked growing up or that you follow. It does not matter. You are vegan for life. Okay? So there's understanding that. Anyone who says they're vegan and then stops being vegan, they were never vegan, because it's so powerful in your own mind, your own emotions. It motivates you, almost like people would say a religion. It motivates you to behave in a certain way, and it does not matter what you see or hear. That is what you're doing for the rest of your life. So that's the first thing. So to understand why it's only 1% is vegan and why the world is the way it is, you need to understand, since the advent of Industrial Revolution, and that was marked by the change in the way that we behave, our society, and that was, it came about, the roots of that foundation of the shift from, the Victorian era, within the Victorian era, so 200-300 years ago, in the UK, in England, fossil fuels, so it could be oil or coal, for example, was extracted from the ground, and the energy that is within those fossil fuels was used to power machinery, to power the industrialized revolution. So the world became industrialized, and in that shift in England, so its roots were here in England. So you'd go to places like, so we call it the Midlands, so in like the middle of the UK or middle of England, or down in the south. There was lots of mines, and this marked the beginning of, you could call it, modern capitalism. So capitalism is the extraction of the Earth's raw materials. So in this case, it might be metals. We take raw materials from the Earth, and it also could be biological material. So it's not just what's under the ground, but above ground. So raw materials is everything on the surface of the planet. Capitalism is about the extraction of the Earth's raw material, and then through industry, for infinite growth of profit, raw materials are turned into products for sale on the market, and not necessarily, excuse the noise. So there's some industrialized revolution there. Petrol engine there. And for this infinite growth, it comes at the price of the finite resources of the planet. So how is this relating to veganism? It seems like we're going a bit off topic. Well, it's very important. Very important to understand where veganism sits in terms of the overall understanding of how the world works. So capitalism is the current system that we all live in. That's the world that's the system that now runs the world. So there's no such thing as really socialism anywhere or communism anywhere. These sorts of ideas that maybe you think, well, there's other places in the world that have communism. Most of the world now, it's a capitalist world. Okay, so communism, that system of government, that idea, it failed, unfortunately. And now also some people also argue that capitalism has failed, so we live in a post-capitalist world. Initially the idea was that capitalism through the extraction of raw materials and production of products, all of that wealth in theory would have been given to the working class in order for them to improve their life quality. But just like the history of humanity, all it did was swap kings and queens of the past for kings and queens of industry. So kings and queens still exist, and they still rule the world and decide the rules. So this is a plutocracy. So we live in a plutocracy. So that is a system governed by the wealthy and the powerful, and they dictate the rules for everyone else. So we currently live in a fossil fuel filled industrial world. So we use fossil fuels, we extract fossil fuels from the environment, from the ground, and then we use this energy source in order to power the machinery that produces infinite numbers, constantly growing numbers of useless products, meaningless material items, in order to generate profit. So the way this relates to veganism is the food. So just like how we've used capitalism, the capitalist system, capitalism has changed agriculture from the agricultural revolution, which was about 10 to 13,000 years ago. There was a shift from a nomadic existence where we would have been gathering and hunting, mainly gathering roots, starchy roots, bulbs, corms, things that had lots of sugar and starches in, and maybe also some wild fruit, but mainly, and a little bit of hunting, but it mainly would have been plant-based. Mainly, this is an obvious thing if you think about our position in the food chain. We were not the top, so there were predators, and then we would have been below them, and they probably would have hunted us in the wild, and we would have just been looking for smaller animals to hunt. But as you know, things run away from you, and it's very difficult if you don't have guns and modern weaponry, which are weapons of mass destruction, but I'll get into that in a moment. So 10 to 13,000 years ago, there was a worldwide shift into the agricultural revolution where we started growing starch staple crops like rice and oats and wheat and corn, potatoes all around the world. So potatoes in South America, rice in Asia, and oats and wheat in the Middle East, in Europe. We call this the breadbasket of the world. And these supported the development of human civilization as we know it across the world. It saw the increase in populations. Starch supported the worldwide pillars of empires and civilization and successful populations throughout history. Starch, plant-based diet, mainly plant-based. So this allowed, eventually, this turned into what we have now, which is modern farming, which is no longer about producing food for survival, but instead we've turned, through capitalism, the exploitation of the soil. We grow products. So now mainly in the US, for example, it's soybean and corn is the main food product that is grown, and of about 38% of this is grown. So for example, soybean is grown to be given to livestock, to be fed to livestock so that Westerners can eat meat, and another 38% of that is grown to be turned into biofuel to be put into the combustion engine of cars. So no longer do most of the, or a lot of, as we call it, agriculture, this idea that modern farming is needed to feed the mouths of the hungry around the world is a lie. It's not true. Most of it is gone. It goes to feed animals that can then be fed to humans, or to go to biofuel, to go to a combustion engine for cars. And this all happens because we have fossil fuels and from fossil fuels that gave us the energy, and people developed over hundreds of years machinery, technology, in order to use the energy provided by fossil fuels to create industry and technology. So moving forward in time from 10 to 13,000 years ago, all the way through the development of sort of modern farming of the last 100 years, through to the Second World War, marked a shift because, and I'm talking about the US a lot in this, because the US is the current global superpower. It is the largest empire the world's ever seen. Yes, the Roman Empire was big, and then the British Empire was the biggest empire on the planet, but now it's the American Empire. So at the end of the Second World War, after fascism was defeated in Europe, there was a huge war economy that had been created, and part of that was from refining fossil fuels to create chemicals for war. So fossil fuels are used to create ammonia, these nitrogen-based products. These are the chemicals of war that are used to make bombs. So obviously this huge industry, multi-billion-dollar industry in itself, had to find a new, as we call, juicy steak to get its claws into, and this came in the form of communism. So communism was used throughout the 20th century as an excuse in order for the industrial military complex to constantly grow, an excuse for arms to be constantly made, and to create a war economy. So the US is now a war economy, rather than it being a socialist state. It's now a war economy. So since 1945 up until present day, the reason why the US constantly keeps invading countries around the world, or being behind coups that cause leaders around the world to be assassinated, to install a government that is sympathetic to the US or the US's cause, is in order to go into that country and extract its raw materials in order to support the industries of the West. So one of those industries is modern agriculture. Obviously another one is fossil fuels for combustion engine for the motor car. And another one of those industries is for the production of meaningless material items. So for example, the Iran-Iraq War, the Gulf War, wars that we've seen in the Middle East, and very recently in 2026, the beginning of 2026, in Venezuela. And the reason why, especially the Middle East wars, is because the US goes in, uses the army, the military, in order to invade, take over the country, and then behind them comes the companies, the corporations of the West. So for example, ExxonMobil comes in with their pipelines and it starts extracting the oil, and then this gets sent to the West in order for the development of chemicals. So the way this relates to veganism is animal agriculture. So most crops now, so you got soybean, these are grown in order to be fed to animals, for then Westerners to get fat and sick and suffer from chronic disease. So I'll get onto that in a moment. So the oil that is extracted from around the world, that the industrial military complex of the US uses as a big hammer, a big stick, and there comes a paradox. Supposedly the West, or the US, is the leading country in the Western civilized world. But the paradox becomes that, just like the British Empire, that used to be in itself the equivalent of what the US is now, and this idea of civilizing the world, the civilized Western world has now always had the biggest stick to go around hitting people with, to tell them and show them and get them civilized. And there's the paradox. So the British Empire did the same thing. You call it gunboat diplomacy. They went around the world, the British Empire, with the British Army, and they used it as a stick to beat people over the head with in order to extract raw materials from those countries. So obviously, for example, British India was the gem of the British Empire because the British realized that it was full of a vast amount of riches, gold and spice, for example, and obviously a large population that could be exploited. So this is what empire is. It's about exploitation, and obviously that comes at the price of the people. So lots of people die, the environment is destroyed. So these are the consequences of the world that we live in, that is based on a capitalist system fueled by fossil fuels. And the industries that are fueled by fossil fuels are destroying the planet. So the Western world is drowning in fossil fuels. The way this relates to animal agriculture or agriculture is because the current system relies on, it comes at the price of destroying the topsoil. So we're losing the topsoil from constant tilling, chemical spraying, and overuse of the soil from monocrops, and monocrops not for feeding people but being fed to animals and used to be sold onto a market for the value, monetary value that it can be, that it can reach, rather than the actual value that it gives for people's health and the value that it gives people as it is as a raw material. So that's how the world works now. Everything is based on its value that it can reach on a market, on a global market, rather than the value that it actually gives to life, to humans. Excuse me. So after the Second World War, this huge industry of chemicals that had been created, the chemical industry, the petrochemical industry, these chemicals of war that I talked about, ammonia, nitrate, this is now still created, but instead of it going also just into guns and bombs and military and war, which it still does, it now is used and sprayed directly onto fields as fertilizers. So since 1960, there's been an almost tenfold increase in the fertilizers, nitrogen-based fertilizers used in the world, and specifically talking about the Western world as well. So in the US, these chemicals are now sprayed onto the fields, and usually again it's corn and soybean, and these are just commodity crops. They're not for feeding, not necessarily going to be fed directly to human beings to sustain them for life, to keep them alive, just for that purpose. But what they can make be sold and grown. So as much soybean and corn is grown as possible, and as a result we destroy the soil. So every time there's a heavy rainstorm or there's a really strong wind, the soil, a layer of soil is taken away, stripped off the surface, drains into waterways, which eventually, for example in the West, in the Mississippi is called the Big Muddy. And the reason why it's called the Big Muddy is because since the Dust Bowl in the 1920s, 1930s in America, Dust Bowl has not stopped. We continue to lose topsoil around the world, particularly in the Western world. Is bad. So the Big Muddy is called the Big Muddy because it's full of the topsoil. It's full of topsoil, and then this eventually drains into the Gulf of Mexico, where there is one of the biggest dead zones. Dead zones being in the oceans around the world, where rivers run out into the oceans, into estuaries and into the oceans, from all of the chemicals and topsoil and minerals that come out off the soils and into the waterways and into the rivers. They go out into the ocean and they cause algal blooms, and then these algae die, as they sink and die, when they're broken down, they use up the oxygen in the water, and it kills the ocean because there's no oxygen for sea life. So there's about 450 or so of these dead zones around the planet, and they continue to grow. So there's one way we're destroying the planet. So yeah, it's great, isn't it? So this is how the current system operates under the fossil fueled economy. So this is the capitalist economy system. Infinite growth for producing ever infinite amounts of profit. So at the moment, it's capitalism gives the value, the economic value, that it is in our economic interests to go extinct. So at the moment, if you look at the data that's available, the current system that we're operating under, in the next few hundred years, the human race will likely go extinct. And this will be attributed to a number of factors. So one of those is the loss of the topsoil. So we're losing the topsoil. So in vast amounts of topsoil around the world, it takes about 1,000 years to grow just a few centimeters of fertile soil. Excuse me. So there's one factor we're going to lose. From fossil fuels, so fossil fuel, also animal agriculture is a leading cause of climate change. The burning of fossil fuels. So you got fossil fuels and animal agriculture. These are leading causes of climate change. Sorry about the noise. I'm here in the middle of nowhere. It's a running theme of my videos. A running theme of my videos is that I go into the middle of nowhere and there's always people making noise. So one of the reasons for our extinction is loss of topsoil. It's also climate change. This leads to food insecurity, because when you have a changing climate, generally it's warming, you also get extreme events. So you get extreme droughts, you get extreme rainfall. So literally you might get hail or tornadoes and hurricanes, and these just because we base our current system on monocrops, vast fields of monocrops. And also you've got things, like blight, and then that relates to, using GMO. So just in one hailstorm or one hurricane or just one extreme event, you could lose hundreds of thousands of acres of food, inverted commas. And also, so that leads to food insecurity, and then this leads to geopolitical instability around the world. And you've also, because of climate change, generally an increase in global temperature, you'll see sea levels rise, which over the next 100 years, because there are billions of people that live within just a meter or so of sea level, all these people are going to be displaced around the world, which means that there's going to be people who are refugees of climate change. So hundreds of millions of people migrating around the world, again increases geopolitical instability. And then eventually all these factors culminate probably in a thermonuclear exchange of our current weapon systems. So thermonuclear bombs are vastly more powerful than they were that were used on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in the Second World War. So the atom bomb, the idea of the atom bomb, the fission bomb that was used on, so the first atom bomb that was used was about 15 kilotons, and that killed about 100,000 people. But the bombs that are now used, just the ignition source, so just the spark, is the equivalent of one of these atom bombs. That is the spark to light a much greater, much more powerful bomb, a fusion bomb. So the current average payload of modern weapon systems is about 475,000 kilotons versus 15 kilotons, which was, so 475 kilotons, sorry, So 475,000 tons of TNT equivalent versus 15,000. So if just one of those was dropped on a modern city, like in the US, for example, you would see millions of people die just from one of those. So the most political thing you'll ever do is veganism. So this is why it relates, this is why it's so important to go vegan, because it's not in your best interest to die from heart disease and cancer from these animal products. So there's another thing. These animal products, we know these animal proteins, all the excess fat, it's the leading cause for all of the chronic diseases that we now see growing, this epidemic of growing disease of obesity, type 2 diabetes, also type 1 diabetes linked to animal protein, autoimmune diseases, growing autoimmune diseases, cancer, heart disease still remains the leading cause of death of men and women in the civilized Western world, and is now the leading cause of death. And these are all preventable. Chronic diseases are all preventable by switching to a starch and fruit-based diet. Starch and fruit-based diet provides all of the nutrients that we need as human beings, because that's where nutrients come from, is plants, not animals. The reason why nutrients are in the soil is because when a star explodes, a supernova, through the incredible heat and energy and pressure from a supernova, a dying star, it provides the system by which elements, smaller elements, are converted into larger elements. So that's why the reason why we have iron and calcium, magnesium and zinc and all of these elements in the soil is because once that star explodes and it forms a gas cloud, it condenses and form the solar system. So that's where everything comes from in the soil. Plants take up these elements that are in the earth that came from an exploding star billions of years ago, that then it secretes into a gas cloud, creating the star that now we go around on our little planet. Okay, so the planet is like a spaceship, and the atmosphere and everything that we see around us, all of this life here, is the life support system that keeps us alive. The only thing we ever do is destroy it. There's nothing that we do that increases the level of life, the level of hospitality. So we're making the planet more inhospitable to life. So for example, of mammals that are alive now, 94% of all mammals by biomass is now either human beings or animals that are grown in animal agriculture. So just think about that. Even in the short time that we've been on this planet and modern animal agriculture has existed, 94% of all mammal biomass is now either human beings or animals grown to be killed so that we can get fat and sick and die of cancer and heart disease and diabetes. 94% of all mammals on the planet are now either humans, cows, pigs, sheep. How ridiculous is that? And the same is about true for birds. So most birds by biomass are now chickens. So about 71% of all birds are now just chickens. So about 92 billion land animals are killed every year for animal agriculture, and about 1 to 3 trillion fish are killed every year, and hundreds of millions of animals are killed for animal testing. So animal testing in labs that has never given us a cure for any of the leading causes of death, but people continue to torture animals to death in animal testing, as well for cosmetics as well. So the way that chronic disease relates to the pharmaceutical industry is because crude oil is refined into petrochemicals, which is then refined into pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceuticals are then given to people who suffer from chronic disease, which is from animal products, which relies on fossil fuels, and the chemicals from the petrochemical industry, which are refined from crude oil. So animal agriculture relies on crude oil and it kills you. And then the pharmaceutical industry, which also poisons you. So animal agriculture poisons you. Pharmaceuticals then poison you when you get chronic disease, and you just create this cycle of disease and suffering and death. So the only real positive I can give, we're still on. The only real positive point I can give is, yes, there are things that we can do. So the things that represent freedom from this system, freedom from destruction and freedom, so literally freedom, is the bicycle. So the bicycle is the symbol of freedom. The motor car is the symbol of prison, the prison system of the modern world. This idea of consumerism, being locked in the metal box of the car and being trapped to crude oil. And the electric car is not the answer to, is not the savior, is not our answer to saving the planet. It's about the answer to saving the motor car. It keeps the car as at the center of our lives, rather than the symbol of freedom, the bicycle. And also sugar. So you can either get your energy from sugar or fat. Fat leads to chronic disease, whereas sugar leads to physical and the physical freedom. So literally your health improves and you become free from disease. So in the West you have animal products high in fat, high in protein. You look to the East and you have people who are living on white rice, for example, and you'd associate these people with being always lean and not obese. And they aren't all professional cyclists or professional athletes. It's because they eat a low fat, low protein, high carbohydrate diet, which means that they don't lose their resistance to being obese. Okay, so whenever anyone, regardless of their genetics, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're eating the high fat, high protein diet, doesn't matter about genetics, you're going to get fat and sick, and there's nothing you can do about that. It doesn't matter about genetics, okay? Whether you're black or Asian or white or whatever colour or wherever you come from, if you're going to eat foods that are not fit for human consumption, i.e. animal products, these rich Western foods. So the reason why animal products are so ingrained in the Western world is because the Western world sees itself as the kings and queens of the world. So industry gets the general public, the mass of civilization. It tells people, industry, capitalist industry, it brainwashes and conditions the mass of humanity into believing that it is in their best interest to die from heart disease and die from cancer and destroy the planet that their own children live on, so that the kings and queens of industry can continue to get rich from reaping the rewards, the capitalist rewards of extracting ever more of the finite resources that the planet can give, turning them into meaningless commodities, and out of that they reap the monetary reward of living like kings and queens. And they continue to fool the mass of humanity that continues to live on minimum wage. Most people are living on minimum wage, and then in return they get all of these meaningless items, meaningless technology that is making people's lives worse and destroying the planet. Hello from the future. There's just a few things that I forgot to mention, so I just remembered. So the reason why you're being promoted these high fat, high protein animal products is because these are expensive. You know that when you go to the shops. If you buy them on your food bill, these are the most expensive things, and this is why these are promoted. Those things that are the most expensive products are always the ones that are going to be promoted, because we live in a capitalist system. So everything that favors needing to use more fossil fuels, so animal products need more fossil fuels over the production of plant foods, then the system that always going to promote the most amount of energy needed, therefore the most amount of fossil fuel use, is the industries that are going to always be promoted. And this is part of why the products that you see the reason why they get promoted the most is because part of that is the marketing. So marketing budgets will be the largest with those products that sell the most things. So that's why even when we talk about science, most science now is fake food industry science, okay? So literally papers are written by scientists hired by food companies, the food industry, to write a paper that says, well, this is favourable for our product. And then it just becomes more part of the marketing. So lots of science papers now in the 21st century are marketing. Simple as that. So you have to always look, what does the funding come from? Is there a grant from the government? Okay, that might be okay. But if there's a grant from the, food industry, no smiles. If there's a grant from, we're talking about even like, animal products, you might say a company from that food industry, but even plant foods like oils, which I don't promote, so no oils. So fat is bad regardless of where it's come from, excess fat. So olive oil, for example, you'll see a study saying olive oil is great, and then you'll look and say, oh, it was funded by, an olive oil company. So no, that's not real. It's not real. It's just scientists for hire. And real science is done by scientists being rational. So the whole point of science is it gives a rational understanding of the world, whereas the rest of the world is irrational. So the current system is irrational because it puts extinction, leads to extinction before oil. I just had to insert that in, so I'll insert this clip in. So that's the point. Okay, so excuse me. So marketing is pushing high fat, high protein. So this high fat, high protein craze is the manifested understanding. So literally that's how the real world manifests itself in your daily reality, is seeing. That's the tip of the iceberg. This push for protein and fat is part of this system of producing profits from literally the flesh of people, so from their ill health. So high fat, high protein leads to ill health. So for example, you're promoting all this animal protein, well, there should be no surprise that you see increased rates of cancer if the whole point of talking about protein is for growth, maybe in the fitness industry, for growth, big muscles, growth. Yeah, that's what cancer is. So fat and protein are promoters of cancer. So there's something called mTor. mTor is an enzyme, part of a nutrient-seeking pathway that promotes growth in the body. So you're promoting mTor, so you're promoting growth, which is promotion of increasing the likelihood of cancer. So just needed to insert that clip in there because that's why animal products are the most expensive. So the most expensive things are animal products. Plant foods are cheaper because they require less energy. They literally require less energy in the manufacturing process to get them from the field to your plate. Whereas animal products, they take huge amounts of resources of fossil fuels, of crops, of land use, soil use, of water use. Just the Western world, so just a small amount of the population is causing all of this destruction, whereas billions of people still around the world get most of their calories from plant foods, staple plant foods, and not the foods of the kings and queens. So there's so much to break down. I'll let you go back to the rest of the video, but there is so much. Okay, there's so much in this video, about an hour long or so. It's just the tip of the iceberg. But it's not in your best interest to die from cancer and heart disease, and also in the West, in the US, to be bankrupted by the medical healthcare industry for treating chronic diseases. One way of getting out of that is a plant-based diet, going back to just eating starch staple foods, eating fruit, freeing ourselves from this idea that sugar is the cause of all disease, when it's our way of freeing ourselves from disease and freeing ourselves from destruction of the planet. So our bodies run on sugar, glucose derived ATP. When we eat fat, we get fat and sick. When we eat sugar, we get healthy. And when I mean sugar, I mean foods high in carbohydrate like white rice and potato and beans and corns and fruit. These are low protein, low fat foods, high in carbohydrate. All carbohydrate is sugar, and all sugar is carbohydrate because it's all glucose and fructose. It's not grown in a lab. Even white table sugar itself that you use to power yourself when you're exercising, it's not grown in a lab. It comes from vegetables. It either comes from beet sugar, for example. So a lot of beet sugar here is grown in the UK, or it comes from sugarcane, which is grass. And a lot of the animals you see, like these sheep behind me, they're eating grass. So they're on their plant-based, high sugar, low fat, low protein diet, like human beings should. Human beings thrive on a plant-based diet fueled with sugary foods like starch and fruit, and they do poorly when they eat fat and protein, especially animal protein. All you need to eat is between 40 and 60 grams of protein a day, unlimited carbohydrate to always feel satiated, just eat to feel full. Don't count calories. Calories have got nothing to do with being healthy. There's no such thing as a fat animal in nature. It's only when human beings and animals come into contact with humans, they get fat, especially in feedlots, for example, where we fatten animals up in the last few weeks before we go and kill them. We feed lots of these low carbohydrate, low calorie foods. Okay, so that's another thing. Plant foods are low calorie, so the conversion of all of these low calorie foods in the fields to high calorie foods, which is fat. So white table sugar, 4 calories per gram. Fat is always 9 calories per gram. Staple starches are usually about 1 to 2 calories per gram. The potato is even less than 1 calorie per gram quite often. It takes energy to produce all of these low calorie foods and convert them to high calorie fat, and then to feed that to us. So fossil fuels powers not just the fertilizers but also the industry. You take all of this, loads and loads of staple corn and soybean, take that and then you feed it to animals, and in the body of animals they convert because they're good at that, they're efficient at that. Human beings are very, very poor, almost non-existent. We do not convert sugar to fat. That's not our physiology. Whereas these animals that we have taken from the wild and we've domesticated them, for example the cow is good at converting these low calorie plant foods into high calorie fats, which it then deposits in its fat, in its tissues as fat, and then you eat that and you get fat and sick. So chronic disease is food poison. It's poisoning the planet. We're destroying the planet. Fossil fuels, capitalism, the war machine, the war economy of the Western world. The Western world is based in a war economy. It's not based on humans. It's profit before humans. So the constant war economy of the US, for example, the leading superpower that everyone else follows, all its allies have to do what it says, regardless of how badly it behaves. The irrationality of capitalism is irrational, because the end result is extinction and the destruction of planet for infinite growth for a few people to make a lot of money and live like kings and queens. It's irrational because even their children will die. These people that are generating all this wealth for them to accumulate all this wealth and power, even their children will die as a result of this, because you might hear about, we're going to Mars or the moon. The reason why people will not survive on any other planet is because we're linked to bacteria in the soil, bacteria on the planet, bacteria in our own bodies. So bacteria, for example, in our microbiome, bacteria are part of the system by which we make healthy fatty acids inside the lining of the gut, or inside the gut, and then the gut uses those in order to create a tight gut junction which stops leaky gut. So we are inherently part of the planet. We are linked to the bacterial microbiome, not just in our gut, but the biome that exists all across the planet. So the average cell count in the human, for example, in an average male is about 35 trillion human cells, but there is the equivalent same amount of bacteria. There's about 35 trillion bacterial cells. A woman is about 28 trillion cells in a woman, average size woman. There's about 28 trillion bacteria cells. So that's the reason why we won't be able to survive anywhere else, is because that relation to nature, bacteria itself, in the soil, for example, in our microbiome, everywhere we go, we are connected to the planet. So just like everything else that we would then take and try and grow somewhere else, it's not possible. We're trapped on this planet. But the beauty of that is, this is heaven, okay? So the horror of that is realizing that we are in heaven, but you're trapped in this prison of people who are motivated to destroy it for profit and power, and then the rest of humanity has been brainwashed, conditioned into believing that it is in their best interest to continue to allow just a few people to destroy the planet, to destroy the very soil and pollute the air, to pollute the water that they drink, to destroy the planet that their very children or grandchildren are going to live on. And they believe, for some reason, that is in their best interests to continue to defend the industries of war. So the military-industrial complex is a cash for flesh business, and the animal agriculture industry is a cash for flesh business. So the military-industrial complex is human flesh for cash, animal agriculture is animal flesh for cash, and the modern medical healthcare industry is human flesh for cash. So carrying out needless operations and giving people drugs that poison them to death, chemotherapies and diabetes drugs for hypertension, all these are not needed if you fix the cause rather than treating the symptoms. So if we fix the cause of all of this destruction, it's plant-based, based on cycling, high carbohydrate, low protein diet. So again, I'm inserting this clip in here because I didn't mention in the first take the reasons why it will be so difficult, or why it is so difficult to change the current system based on capitalism, is because power in itself comes from having wealth. Accumulating wealth accumulates power, position in society. So there's a lot of people in society that are doing, there's more people in society that are doing badly because of capitalism, but they're fooled into believing this aspiration of the American dream where you pull yourself up by your own bootlaces and get rich. No. Wealth is collected and kept by the few. They do not want you to be wealthy and have power, because the whole point of being king and queen is to consolidate wealth to your own family or to yourself. But there are a lot of people, yes, that are doing well because of capitalism. For example, yes, you've got corporations, industries, the heads of these companies, they do well. And also when we look at the military-industrial complex, the most lucrative industry on the planet is killing human beings for money, destroying the planet at the same time. That does very well. So 2025, the US budget, military budget for defense, or for now the Department of War, was almost $1 trillion, about $900 billion, just for 1 year. So if you look at the pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry, the pharmaceutical industry, again, the heads of those companies, they're making lots of money. Scientists who are employed to develop new drugs, they make a lot of money. Doctors who, for example, cardiologists who are getting paid, if you're a very busy cardiologist in the US will be making upwards of $1 million a year. Very busy one. And again, they're making all of this money and living living the life of luxury based on heart disease primarily caused by the rich Western diet. There's no financial, in the current system, no financial incentive for any of these systems that are causing the demise of the planet. They're getting rich and living well like kings and queens. There's no reason for them to say, well, I'm not going to stop doing these surgeries for a disease that is chronic and therefore could be arrested and reversed through diet, through a low-fat, plant-based diet, vegan diet. They're not going to say, oh, well, I don't want that to happen. There's no incentive. Okay? There's no incentive from the system itself. There is no push coming from the system, the world system itself, from the capitalist system. It will not come from the industries. The industries will not change the system that is doing a very good job at doing what it's meant to do, which is accumulating wealth for the few, off the back of suffering of the many. So there's another reason why it has to come from the people. The people have to decide that they want to control their own destiny, they want to control their own future, just like it is with diet and veganism. You control those things, you control your own destiny. So you get the bike, you literally control your destiny. You eat the food and you control for diet and lifestyle, and you control your own destiny. If that's what you're looking for in life, is to control your destiny. And we'll carry on with the rest of the video. We changed the food system to a one based on growing food for people and not growing profits for the wealthy. As soon as we break free from this idea that meat is part or center in the importance of the human diet, as soon as we break free from this idea that sugar is bad for us, we'll be able to save ourselves from our impending doom of extinction. Extinction is coming regardless of what you believe and you should be eating steak or eggs or bacon or whatever you might think. So the truth doesn't care about your feelings, regardless of how strong they may be about certain things. Modern agriculture there. Modern animal agriculture. Yeah, so there you go. I hope you enjoy the video. It shouldn't be depressing, well, it is depressing because, we're destroying the planet. But there is an answer, okay? The easiest thing you can do to make the world a better place. The meaning of life is about making the world a better place than what you came into, or endeavoring at least not to make it worse. This is the greatest thing that you can do in your life, okay? This gives life meaning. So for me, I'm vegan for the animals first, not health, but as a positive consequence, you are the healthiest you're going to be on a starch and fruit-based life and lifestyle. So we can all go vegan. We can do our part in saving the planet. The planet will continue to be here after we've gone. It's just about reducing the suffering that we are causing. And yes, if you have children or grandchildren and you want your DNA to continue on this planet, then it won't stay on this planet. Your DNA will go extinct because we survive as a species on the life that just a few centimeters of soil gives us. The energy from plants lives on just a few centimeters of soil, life-giving soil. But we continue to destroy the atmosphere, we continue to pollute the earth, pollute the water, extract ever increasing amounts of raw materials that are finite. They have a fixed amount. The planet can only support such a small amount compared to our huge extraction. So if you can, get a bicycle, use your bicycle as much as you can to commute, go to the shops, buy your food, whatever it might be, as much as you can. Plant-based veganism is easy and cheap. It is so easy Go out and buy staple starch foods like rice and potatoes and fruit. Get a bicycle, change your worldview. War is not good. It's hell for people, it's hell for the planet. Peace is the only way that we survive. A war economy is the extinction economy, the extinction of life. The way that we politically change, so politically we go vegan, we get rid of the car industry, automotive industry, we use public transport, and we change to a state in which a socialist, ecological socialist state based on investing in humans and the planet and not investing in the weaponry of war, the economy of war. That's the way we go. That's the little bit of positive that I can give, is these are the things we can do. But if we continue not to, if you're in your 20s, if you maybe 18, 19, 20, you're in your 20s, you'll probably be able to witness the beginning of the collapse. So fish stocks are going to start collapsing in the next few decades. We're going to see more hurricanes, more extreme weather. And the easiest thing you can do is go vegan. Isn't that amazing? So I hope you enjoy the video. Now I'm out here getting fit. So I've been writing a book, but I'm out here now getting fit, finishing off the book. So stay tuned for that. If you've got any comments or questions, put them in the comment section. It's quite a long video, but there's a lot to cover as briefly as I can. Probably left some things out. It's not a scripted video, it's just putting down this is how the world works. It's just the truth. The truth does not change regardless of your perceptions of the world. There's the truth. Okay, so what you create in your mind is the world that you perceive in the real world. So I create what is actually there. So a lot of people, they believe in this idea that, they believe in the world that they see. But if you recreate, if you create the world that you want to live in, is the one that you create in your mind. So a vegan world peace, the way that you create that is by what you perceive in your own mind, and that is through being vegan, plant-based, morals, ethics. You need morals and ethics. So every day, most people that I communicate with, most adults, they're ridiculous the way they behave. They don't have any basic morals or ethics. They behave badly. So it's a world behaving badly. Anyway, so like and subscribe. Got more videos showing what you can eat, what bike you should get, the lifestyle that you should lead, not to behave badly. Another little clip here I just wanted to add at the end of this video, because there's something that didn't really end the video very well. So this is more animal agriculture here, back here. So this is some factory farming out here, chickens. So to be vegan is a cry, is a cry for trying to stop the destruction of the world that you live in. It's saying that you're not going to take part in the genocide of life. That's what being vegan is. You don't take part in the genocide of life. You stop paying for animals to be stabbed and killed all day. You stop taking part in the destruction of your planet, and you stop taking part in the destruction of your health. So everyone should be screaming from the rooftops. Everyone should be screaming wherever they are that they don't want to be part of the destruction of the world. So just like here, I've got fertilizer here dumped here, for example, because the current system is stripping the earth of its fertility, the soil of its fertility. If it was such such a good system, sustainable system, you wouldn't need something like this just up here, for example, which is going to be spread around. So now if you become vegan and then you realise, how the world works, it can become very, very difficult for some people, and that's why some people just can't live anymore. A lot of people who are protesting, a lot of these people who become consciously aware of what's going on, it's too much, and they can't live any longer. They can't survive the pain that they see in the world. But I think that's partly what's maybe more horrifying of seeing how the world works and seeing destruction, is seeing how most people seemingly say that they don't care and they are committed to extinction. And you could go around screaming in the street, and you'll be locked up, screaming from the rooftop, screaming wherever you go, we need to stop, we need to change. And yeah, just that could mentally destroy your life from that understanding of what we're doing, and that most people will look at you funny. They will call you extreme. You will be called extreme for not supporting the industry, the system of extinction, which is what the system currently is. So yeah. Go around, just do what you can, start a social media channel, do what you can if you want to be, if you can't take it that you just, you need to do something, then, but you'll find that a lot of your friends, family, people that you'll meet in life, they are committed to dying from heart disease and cancer, from chronic disease. They are committed to paying for killing of animals. They are committed to the extinction of life on heaven. Okay, so that's where we are, and that's what we're doing to heaven. We're turning it into one vast farm. Wherever you go, out here in the middle of nowhere, it's just one big vast animal farm of crops grown to be fed for animals. That's why everywhere you look, you got sheep there. You just a field, just grass and sheep, two species, grass and sheep, or grass and cows, or corn or soybean, or cows or sheep, or pigs, and nothing else. Anyway, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.